Good morning, party people. Happy Friday. It is the end of a long work week. At least it felt really long for me. I don't know about y'all. SQL Pilot, good to see you over there in Twitch chat. So I have some stuff that I have to do today around recording demo videos for PollGab. I have to do walkthroughs of the different features designed for different target audiences. So I put on a shirt that was like visibly generic things that sometimes I have really goofy things on them. Today it's a little bit more generic. Good morning, Ashish. Good morning, SQL Dev DBA. Let's see. Let me change my screen setting just a little, make it easier to see chat. There we go. Now, so I kind of think of it as a warm up. When I have to do, I don't want to say scripted videos, but videos that are like demos of features of stuff, I have to have my brain and mouth working in a fluid way. Like I have to be able to I don't do a whole lot of editing. I do a lot of stuff in just one take, start to finish. So like, if you're the kind of person who does a solo TikTok work, you probably want information or you want questions that you can use from your audience in order to help you create new videos. You know, like I want a spiel that I have to walk through, and so I have to have a rhythm. I have to be in the zone. So I think of like office hours as a way to warm up for that. I can warm up my brain and my mouth. I've been working for like 3 hours now. It's 6 a.m. Vegas time. I've been working since like 3 a.m. But just because I'm working doesn't mean I'm talking. I've been doing a whole lot of writing and editing scripts and looked at first responder kit pull requests, editing blog posts, responding to comments, things like that, accounting stuff, boring tax things. So I have to now then get into the frame of mind where I'm speaking. And of course, what's a good way to do that? Is to go through your top voted questions over at PollGab. So top voted question from this morning from Kulstad says, I'm using Ola Hallengren's maintenance scripts for my database maintenance. I've noticed that memory consumption goes from 35% to 85%. Okay, so your first real question is does memory consumption matter? With a database server, you actually want it to be really high. You want SQL Server caching as much juicy data pages as it possibly can so that when end users run queries, SQL Server can rapidly serve that data straight out of memory. High memory usage is a good thing on SQL Server. SQL Server does not let go of that memory unless the box comes under memory pressure. It doesn't like automatically shrink down memory usage the way that a lot of other applications do. So if you want to learn more about that, Google for Brent Ozar, a sysadmin's guide to SQL Server memory. And I've written up a guide to how SQL Server uses memory that's targeted at developers, Windows sysadmins, Linux sysadmins, so that they can understand why high memory usage is normal and why you shouldn't do anything about that. Greg at BMW, good to see you. Let's see, next up we have Mailbox. Mailbox says, hey Brent, what's the difference between vertically partitioning a table into two tables, and I'm going to rephrase that as splitting a table into two parts, versus creating a non-clustered index on a subset of columns? Well, the easy answer is it's really easy to add an index. You can do that online. In Enterprise Edition, for example, it's easy to add an index and have queries immediately take advantage of it. It doesn't break your inserts, updates, and deletes. Whereas when you go in there with a saw and a monkey wrench and you start tearing tables apart, you're going to break applications, you're going to break inserts, updates, and deletes, you're going to have to do all kinds of testing. I can think in my entire career, probably I can count on the number of times I've done it in one hand, tear a table apart into multiple tables. That's why I don't want to say it never works or it's never a good idea, but just because you break so much about an application, it's generally a bad idea. Marky Twitcher, first time chatter. Woo! Welcome to the group. BMC Means says happy to catch you live again. Shane O'Nellis, hola. So let's see here. Next up, we have Hank the DBA, who asks, hi Brent, I manage about 90 SQL servers and I struggle to keep up with patching. You're not alone. It says, what is the best method to ensure that each environment is kept up to date? Okay, unfortunately, the reason why automated patching doesn't really work with SQL servers is that automated patching isn't smart enough to know if there's a long-running query happening on your SQL Server right now, should the patching take it down? Ooh, Jim Van Allen, thanks for the renewal there. 11 months. Good to see you back. Should the automated patching kill the query in order to let patching go through? And I'm going to give you an example of when it should and when it shouldn't. When it should, if someone started a transaction and all they did was selects and they left their session open, we should probably kill that transaction because it's not going to hurt anything. Kill that transaction and restart the server in order to apply the patch. Let me give you a time when it shouldn't do that. When you've got a backup running. If you have a backup running and it only is scheduled to run once a week and it takes hours in order to run, you shouldn't interrupt that in order to apply the patch. Because what would typically happen is when the SQL Server restarts to apply the patch, your agent job that was running the backup won't go retry again. People don't get fancy enough to try the backup every hour in case of a failure. You'll just have a backup failure and you won't know about it until you go work through your monitoring systems and go take corrective action. By the time you get involved, you may not be able to take corrective action. You may not be able to run the backup during the middle of the business day. So I wish, and it's a shame in the year 2024 that we don't have a better answer to that question, but I've just never seen an automated patching system that works under those constraints. I have seen plenty of patching systems built by Leroy Jenkins. Should we apply the patch? Leroy Jenkins! Just go and throw the patch in, and to hell with whatever queries we're running automatically. So the people who I've seen go, well, actually, it's really easy to do automated patching. Those are the kinds of people who tend to not give a damn about whatever queries are running on their systems. Next up, Jorriss, aka Richie Rump, asks, are there any tools to unit test SQL other than tSQLt? I haven't seen any. I don't even want to know if they're... I should say I don't want to know if they are. I do want to know if they are. I want to know if they are, but do I want to get involved in unit testing tSQL? Probably not. It's really hard to unit test databases. tSQLt's, I try not to say negative things. That's not entirely true. I do kind of go out of my way to say negative things sometimes. I don't really like tSQLt. It's a giant pain in the rear to set up. You have to mock all your tables. It involves CLR. The testing is complicated. It's not as easy as developers who unit test C# code, for example, or JavaScript code. So it's there, but I just haven't seen anything better for SQL Server either. Next up, Nazan asks, is there a good way to send out notifications anytime someone creates a new database in boxed SQL Server? Okay, so there are a couple of cool ways that you can do this. One, if you have a monitoring tool like Quest Spotlight, Idera SQL DM, whatever, most of them will allow you to run custom queries, and whenever the value changes, alert you. So what you would want to do is do a count star from sys databases, and whenever that number changes, send out an alert. The other thing that you could do is you could say select top one database name ordered by ID descending or creation date descending. Gets a little tricky there because database IDs can be created out of order. Like somebody can create a bunch, then drop a few old ones, then recreate one, and it'll go to a lower database ID. So just be careful with how you test that. The other way that you can do it is you can put triggers on tables, and whenever a row changes in that row gets inserted in that table, for example, you could trigger database mail. Sounds crazy, but you can... It sounds crazy because it is crazy. You can put triggers on system tables under some circumstances. I would not put one on sys databases, but here's where I would put one, is in MSDB backups. There's a table msdb dbo.back, it's like something underscore the database backups or whatever. Biohunter says the mic has static. So you can create a trigger on those backup tables, and then that way what you can do is you can look for databases in a list. You know, like you could set up a table that's got a list of known databases, and whenever a backup happens on a database that isn't in that list, then you could go send out a notification that way. You could also say whenever there's a new database that didn't exist in a list before, like maintain a table, you could do that with the trigger as well, but that's the other place that I would start. Dunja says, your first time live, but a fan. Hey, howdy, welcome. Jeffrey says hi from Wales. Jessica says, what if my backups don't run? You should also have alerting for that as well. Next, Raffi says, will there soon be a day where AI can rewrite all code or stored procedures to move from one database to another? Soon, no. Someday, maybe, but not soon. This is how might this affect the database landscape? I don't think that would happen anytime soon. I think that it would be pretty ugly because also you're going to have to go test all of that code. And remember, in addition, you're going to have some code that's inside the database, like stored procedures. You're going to have some code that's inside functions or triggers. You're going to have some code that's in dynamic SQL. It's extremely hard to rewrite dynamic SQL because remember, it's tSQL that builds other queries. Then you also have code that's embedded inside applications, things like C#, report writing tools, all of which would need to change. So could that happen someday? Yes. In the next 10 years, maybe even 20 years, probably not. Elnor asks, what is your opinion of the fastn query hint? I think query hints are just like tools. I always think of myself as like a carpenter. I think that I've got all kinds of tools laid out across my tool bench here, and it's a matter of finding the right tool and applying it for the right situation. Do I have a bad opinion of fastn? No, not at all. Has it ever gotten me across the finish line? No, not me personally. I have heard from other people that it works for them. I wouldn't be biased against it. I've just never seen, because it's a tool that I never use, right? When you have a tool you never use and you go, oh, that one over there, you're probably going to be unlikely to reach for it for the first time. You're probably going to grab ones that you're already more familiar with. So I kind of look at that as like a chainsaw, like, oh, that's interesting. Not that it's any more or less dangerous. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I have never had a use for that. So there it is. Jeffrey says, AI has started getting good at documenting code. I would also say it's gotten good at finding bugs in code. It's pretty good if you hand it code and say, tell me where this will go wrong. It's less good if you describe a situation and you ask it to write code because it doesn't have enough context to keep your entire database in memory all at once. He says maybe Copilot will be included in SSMS at some point. At the upcoming SQL Bits conference, Microsoft actually has sessions on Copilot type tools in database tools. I would bet it won't be SSMS. I would bet it would be Azure Data Studio because Microsoft seems to be doubling down on Azure Data Studio being the place where you go and write new code, whereas SSMS is more about management of SQL servers and Azure database at this point. SQL Dev DBA says, Redgate has AI SQL prompt now too. I did not know that. I actually haven't seen that. I don't use SQL prompt myself. I should. The problem is they have this licensing thing where it has to phone home, and every time you change desktops, it like goes, makes you phone home again. Because I jump around to different remote desktops all the time, I can't use it. Like I continually spin up new desktops, so it wouldn't work for me. G Surgeon, hi from the Netherlands. I almost wore my Amsterdam sweatshirt today. Ozan says, hi Brent, on a VMware infrastructure, would you recommend vSAN storage config and then 2 different vSANs for data and log files? No, you're over-engineering the bejesus out of that. He says, would you enable HA for the ESXi host or is AlwaysOn enough? That's where you're getting into personal architecture decisions where I really can't give you an architecture design over a short, easy, free Q&A like this. This is one of the reasons why people call me and hire me. I know you're going to find this extremely hard to believe, but I actually make a living doing this. I know, right? You thought that one day I got really lucky and I just magically hit the lottery, and ever since I've never had to work. And you think that I just do this out of the goodness of my heart. I have news for you. There is no goodness in my heart. Unless you're a dog. If you're a dog, I have endless goodness in my heart. I will hang out with you forever. You are tons of fun. But when it comes to human meat bags, I'm not doing a whole lot for you for free. Now, that's not true. I'm sitting here having a discussion right now. SQL DBA says, clip your licensing rights in arrangement with Microsoft. But it's people actually hire me to do that exact kind of architecture design, and I have documents that help me do that kind of design work with clients where I can say, all right, based on this, here, let's go through and talk about this, and here's how you make that decision. Especially when you talk about always on high availability, typically that's done with Enterprise Edition, $7,000 a core. It's real easy for that to add up to real money, and so then our costs as consultants end up looking really cheap compared to, say, Enterprise Edition. Jim Van Allen says, I'm not in business to make a living. I'm in business to make a killing. I love that. That is extremely good. Shane says, Brent got rich doing SaaS as a service. Which, you know what's funny? Clients have told me, they've said, look, the reason that we hire you is that you're irreverent and we know you will cut directly to the chase, that you won't meander around and try to use nice, calming language. You will get straight directly to the chase. Solutions Group Unlimited says, what is the light in the back? Okay, at the moment there are a few of these. Let me see if I have a full screen button. I think I have a full screen button in here somewhere. Okay, yeah. Okay, so quick tour of my office. So let's see, going from that side over to here. We have a Las Vegas sign. I need to change the batteries in that because it's getting a little dim. This is a head from IKEA. When the Apple Vision Pro came out, that I wanted to find something that was like a head that I could just sit the Apple Vision Pro on, so this ended up being that. It has different light settings. I can change it to be the same color all the time. I just hit the on button and there it was. My check engine light, one of you said over in chat, one of you said that my check engine light is on. Yes, I love that, and I'll show you something else that's really funny. Hey Siri, turn the check engine light off. Isn't that cool? I love Apple Home. It's amazing. Hey Siri, turn the check engine light on. I love Apple Home. I'm totally into it. And then this is Simone Yetch's everyday calendar, where there's a light for each day, and anytime you finish a task on a day, you get to push its button and you turn its light on and off. I've done a terrible job of keeping up with that. It measures... or it was supposed to measure the days where I write 2 pages worth of training material. My goal is to write 2 pages of training material every day. And I have not kept up with that. You can see that January 23rd was lit up. There's nothing in February. There was almost nothing in January too. I ended up doing a lot of stuff other than writing training material on those times. Solutions Group Unlimited said that the episode with the Apple headset was odd. Yeah, it was pretty creepy, wasn't it? It was one of those things. I certainly don't intend to do that on a very regular basis because it was super, super creepy. And I don't think it's getting massively better anytime soon. Eve had a really good point. Eve said what they're probably going to do is back down and use Memoji, like use Apple's little cartoon kind of faces, because those are not so deep in the uncanny valley. That uncanny valley was totally... Ugh. Jessica says, please never again. Can you imagine going onto a conference call and using that as your face? I can't even imagine that. That's insane to me. Switch back over to the one where y'all can see each other doing chats. Now, SQL Dev DBA says he enjoyed it, but he used Meta Workrooms a lot, so I'm used to it. Jim Van Allen says it's called a money light, not a check engine light. Yeah, it's funny. I think I got that from BlipShift too. I like BlipShift a lot. I've got stickers and whatnot from BlipShift. Then I got all kinds of other stuff too down in the shelves. One of these days I'll have to do a tour of that as well. All right, next up, let's see. Agnes asks, we have an incoming ad break starting in 3 minutes as well. So for those of you who want to avoid watching ads, you can subscribe to me with Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe with Twitch. You get one free subscription that you can use, and then that way that short circuits all ads, and you won't see any ads. You can also subscribe with your own real money, which is cool. Just only do that if you want to avoid the ads. I do get a good chunk of the money, which is cool. Dreaded Tuesday subscribed with Prime, so that's kind of awesome. So let me clean up my screen a little here so that's out. Yeah, thank you, Dreaded Tuesday. Let's see. So Agnes said, how would I implement query chargeback? I would use Resource Governor. So Resource Governor is a feature that's built into Enterprise Edition, and it lets you classify queries based on incoming login name, server, or the server name where it's coming from, database name, all kinds of cool stuff. And then you don't have to use Resource Governor to slow things down. You can, but you don't have to. And then the cool thing about Resource Governor is that it has these DMVs where you can query by resource group, and then you can break out who used how much CPU. You can break out by memory. If I was going to do chargebacks, I would charge back by CPU because that's typically the easiest one to do. Now, I also did that because you said implement query chargeback. The most common way to do it, though, is usually by data storage size, like however people store. You do like a per terabyte cost and then do chargebacks that way. Yeah, it's not necessarily accurate because you're not capturing query volume, but you know what else isn't accurate? Capturing by CPU either, because you could have problems with blocking, with long running queries due to async network IO, all kinds of stuff. So it's like kind of the only tool that we have available there. Next up, Rom says, do you think we will ever see support for cross-database queries and CLR in Azure SQL DB? I have no idea. So whenever I need to think, it's often the classes and the YouTube videos, you'll see me stop and take a drink. It's usually one of two things. It's either a theatrical thing where I want to make you think while I stop and have a sip of my tasty beverage, or it's my own instinct to go, hold on a second, I need to think before I say this stuff out loud. So I have things that if you and I were together sitting and having a glass of wine, and I had had several glasses of wine already, preferably at your expense, but probably not the kinds of wine that you would buy me, the kinds of wine that I would buy me, I should totally do office hours from my bar. I don't know why that never occurred to me. I should totally do that. I have a bar downstairs. If we were talking over alcohol, I would probably give you an answer there. The answer that I would say is I wouldn't expect to see those features anytime soon. Jessica says CLR probably never, since it's a security nightmare in a hosted environment. I would agree there. I think it's also a super niche feature that just didn't get that much usage. So I would agree with that as well. Mr. TCS or MRTCS subscribed with Prime. Thank you. I appreciate it. Very cool. See, next up, My Tea Got Cold says, if index maintenance is now an outdated idea, why are Ola Hallengren scripts still commonly recommended? Because they do more than one thing. They also do statistics maintenance, they do backups, they do check DB, all kinds of other things. So that's basically why. Oh, MRTCS has just found out that you can't subscribe with the Prime through the app. You can only do it through the website. That is true. You also can't do it through like iOS, if I remember right. Jessica says, I started up my work laptop just to give you the Bezos money. Woohoo! Free Bezos money. Let's see. Next up, we have Thanos. What a great name! Thanos says, "What are your pros and cons of putting relational data into a non-relational database, and the vice versa? Your pros and cons of putting non-relational data into a relational database." Generally speaking, oh, Jessica Phoenix, thanks for the renewal. Generally speaking, I want to put stuff in the cheapest place possible where the queries run as quickly as possible. Non-relational stuff is usually cheapest in a non-relational database. I don't know necessarily about Cosmos, but in terms of, I don't know that I would associate cheap with that. But there are other non-relational products that you could use that would be inexpensive. And they're also extremely fast to query. And I'll give you an example. The PolGab. PolGab, the data doesn't go into a relational database. Because it's not like I say, select top 10 questions ordered by votes descending, join to 15 other tables. There's no relational stuff inside here. So when Richie did it, Richie used, I want to say it's DynamoDB. For some reason, all of a sudden I'm not sure, but I'm 99% sure it was DynamoDB. It's Amazon's DynamoDB. It's non-relational. It is cheap as hell. I think our PolGab costs for DynamoDB the last time that I looked were maybe $15 for the span of a month. Whereas try to find yourself a relational database product that you can get for $15. It becomes pretty hard across the span of an entire month that gets actively queried. Next up, we have Sandy, who says, I've got a temp table with a join. Each row matches a certain number. Had an efficient nested loops until recently. Any idea of what's going on? Unfortunately, troubleshooting execution plans is kind of harder than I can do here inside here. If when you want help with execution plans, you can paste them over at pastetheplan.com. Pastetheplan.com, you can paste your XML in there, and then you can post questions that say dba.stackexchange.com or stackoverflow.com or SQL Server Central.com in their forums. You got a lot of different options there, wherever you like the most. But don't try to paste the plan stuff inside here in PolGab, because I just won't go look. I won't go open up people's execution plans live on a stream, because that really digs down into like consulting territory. Next up, Stonebreaker. I see what you did there. That was kind of clever. It says, does PostgreSQL full text search compare favorably with SQL Server full text search? Yes. Postgres's full text search has some cool things that we don't get inside of SQL Server. For example, they have the ability to write their own word breakers. They have the ability to run a DMV query and see how full text search, and I say DMV because we're SQL Server people, but run a system table query and see how Postgres's full text search will break up a string. It's really cool. It works really well. I don't know how it runs at scale, but I don't have any positive or negative feelings about that either way. Next up, Drinking Violet says, should Microsoft use AI support to convince people to move from Management Studio to Azure Data Studio? Why? Do they make more money when you buy Azure Data Studio? Why do they care which one you use? And why should they spend their time and money trying to get you to move from one to the other? To some extent, these are just free tools that they provide in order to help you make a change or get your work done. But they don't really have cheerleaders going, "Hey, everybody, let's move over here." You know, there are individuals at Microsoft who may have feelings about tools one way or the other, but it's not like they make more money. Until the inevitable day where they start putting ads next to your table lists, but I digress. NSQL Dev DBA says Aaron Stellato is constantly trying to make Azure Data Studio much better for all of us. That's very sweet and kind of you. I love Aaron Stellato to death. She's a genius. But the way that I would change your sentence is I would say that she's trying to make Azure Data Studio suck less. There you go. Next up, Youlika S says, do you have a recommended way to parameterize an order by column when creating dynamic SQL? Yes, and I teach you how to do it in my Mastering Query Tuning class. In the Mastering Query Tuning class, go to the module on dynamic SQL, and I show you that exact thing inside that class. Next up, DB Ape says, I am trying to automate weekly database restores on a test environment. Using SP Database Restore, how can I close existing connections on an existing test database? Oh, that's a really good question. I could have sworn that SP Database Restore had a parameter for that. Let's go look together. Where's the button for this? So I'm going to fire open SQL Server Management Studio and move OBS out of the way. Fire open Management Studio, and I'm going to go open the First Responder Kit. I'm going to go to firstresponderkit.org, and then I'm going to go click on SP Database Restore when it opens eventually. Maybe. Come on, I believe in you. It's mine. firstresponderkit.org. Yeah, I thought it might be an HTTPS thing. Let's go open up SP Database Restore. And let's look at the list of parameters. As I look through that list of parameters, I don't see a kill. So maybe it's not in there. Yeah, I don't see a kill parameter. So if there's not a parameter for it, your question was how would you do it? One way you might do it is you might have a job that goes through and kills queries ahead of time. Another way you might do it is to drop the databases first. There might be a drop. Continue logs. No. Oh, fix. No, no. Oh, let's do a search in here for kill. Kill. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. If existing DB action in 2 or 3, then go kill connections. Okay, so let's see what that existing DB action parameter does. Let's learn about this together. So let's see here. As we look at the list of parameters, existing DB action, this has a tiny int there. So let's see if there's any. I'm going to use the D word. It's okay. It's got a lot of syllables, but I believe that you can do this. HTTP firstresponderkit.org. Let's go read the documentation. So if we page down through here we go. It says SP Database Restore. So we'll go take a look at SP Database Restore. And let's see. It says existing database action. If the database already exists when we try to restore it, 1 sets the database to single user mode, 2 kills the connections, and then 3 kills the connections and drop the database. So that looks like where your answer is there. Isn't that cool? Products have documentation. And if you read that documentation, you get the answers that you're looking for. But realistically, let's be honest, you and me. You're not going to read the documentation, and instead, you're going to pay me for either consulting or training. I'm okay with that. I kind of like that. It's given me a really nice lifestyle. I have a Ferrari, Porsches, a Land Rover, all because y'all refuse to read the documentation. That's pretty cool. Jungle says over there in chat, says recently, hey, certainly, Dev, good to see you. Jungle says recently you posted the adoption rates. Why do you think Azure databases are losing popularity, and will that trend continue? I think that some of it is because people don't install monitoring tools on databases they don't really care about, and they also tend to put a lot of low-end databases that they really don't care about up in Azure SQL DB. I don't say that because Azure SQL DB is a bad product. I think Azure SQL DB is an awesome product. It's really cool. It's probably the cheapest way in the universe to host low-end SQL Server databases. It's certainly a lot cheaper than trying to host SQL Server yourself. But that I think is why you see really low adoption rates on commercial surveys and monitoring tools, because people are just kind of shoving junk up there. Alvi says, where's your site on how to get consulting? If you Google my name, Brent Ozar, you'll see my site, my Twitch channels, YouTube channels, all that kind of thing. And my consulting work is cleverly hidden at brentozar.com. You can click consulting up at the top of that. Next up, let's see here. Going quite a while today, having a good old time with the procrastinating work. Next up, Ilyan says, hey, Brent, my question is how total worker time is correlated with CPU utilization. It is not. Those are not directly correlated. It says, I thought that high total worker time means more CPU utilization, but obviously that is not the case for me. I have master and tempdb as highest consumers on a secondary replica. I would step way back and go, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? I don't know who got you to total worker time as trying to compare that with CPU utilization. That will not work. I'll give you the simplest example possible. Option recompile queries. As queries get option recompiled or they blow out of the plan cache, you simply won't see them in the plan cache. Total worker time won't be there. So I would check what the problem is you're trying to solve, and then maybe we could get you across the finish line better that way. Jordy asks, speaking of the plan cache, Jordy asks, how is Azure SQL DB's plan cache better or worse than a SQL VM plan cache? In Azure SQL DB, the database can restart at any given time. Microsoft patches it live on the fly. They do failovers live on the fly. So if you use tools like SP Blitz first, it'll tell you roughly how long the thing has been up, that Azure SQL DB has been up. Because you can't rely on it being up for any given period of time, it tends to be less useful. In addition, people tend to get really cheap on Azure SQL DB, and so because of that, they have less memory, and because of that, they have less of a plan cache. SQL Dev DBA talking about how I turn that check engine light on and off. Oh, this is a weird one. Loxana says, does Microsoft notice or care that office hours reduces the need for Microsoft SQL Server support tickets? No, because it doesn't. Doesn't that sound weird? It doesn't reduce the need for support tickets, because the people who would paste something in or write a query into office hours and ask it, the reason why they're asking me is A, they're cheap. They don't want to spend the $500 that it takes in order to open up a support case with Microsoft. It does cost money to open a support case, even when you've got support or even when you've got software assurance. And B, they usually have time. It's not an urgent problem. People don't go, help office hours, my database server is down. And then they sit and watch YouTube waiting for Brent Ozar to answer. You know, obviously that doesn't happen. Support cases tend to be more where there's an urgency involved and people have money. So I don't think it really reduces the need for support at all. There we go. Does Microsoft notice office hours? Yes. I do get emails from Microsoft employees about specific things that I've said in office hours, just as Microsoft people use the first responder kit. I used to track every email when people would download the first responder kit, and people from Microsoft support would use the first responder kit on a regular basis. I don't I'm sure it's not a part of anybody's official strategy because Microsoft tries to use open source stuff instead. Brian points out over in chat, I can't believe that's his first time chatting. Brian says, or we've already asked Microsoft and we've not received effective help. I have totally seen that where people have tried to get help from something at Microsoft and they've either posted a question on office hours or asked me and gone, hey, you know what? It's not really that urgent, but Microsoft's not getting anywhere. Hey, could you solve this problem? I don't say that to make it sound like I'm smarter than everyone at Microsoft. I am certainly not. I know a ton of utterly brilliant people at Microsoft. They're generally not working first tier support. DBA and VA asks, hi, Brent, I'm looking at index usage stats. What's the difference between a singleton lookup and a read? To learn that, go to my Mastering Index Tuning class, Mastering Index Tuning, and there's a module on the index usage DMVs, and I explain why there. I explain what the numbers mean, which ones you should pay attention to, and how much faith you should put into each one of those numbers. Next up, we have Demez says, we have queries that regress in performance due to changes in an execution plan. This sometimes happens after a statistics update or when a customer comes in Monday after a weekend. How can we consistently keep good known plans on Standard Edition? Well, you hit it already when you mentioned Query Store. If there's a particular query you care about, you can pin its execution plan using Query Store. You can force guided execution plans. I don't generally do it because your next thought is going to be, well, I want to pin everything in there forever. No, you really don't, because with every cumulative update, with every new version of SQL Server has the ability to build execution plans. It gets better, which isn't always true in the database world. So you don't want to just pin everything. What you want to do is what you mentioned kind of casually there around Query Store is that when you have a bad plan, go back to that bad plan and pin it if you want. Next up, Core says, what is your favorite tool for looking at session weights for a given query? For me, I like SP Blitz Who. I don't take totals for a query. I just look at while it's processing. SP Who's really good for that. If you want total weight stats for a query, you can go run it and get its actual execution plan, and then right-click on the select node of the plan, or insert, update, or delete if it's one of those. Click properties, and then weight stats is going to be down at the bottom of its properties, and then it's totaled as well. Go Sports asks, does Vegas living change much when the Super Bowl is in town? You know what's funny? Super Bowl is not the biggest event here. You know what the biggest event is in Las Vegas? The rodeo. The rodeo is the biggest event here. Happens in December. This is like a cowboy Christmas kind of thing. And it's this big national rodeo finals where hundreds of thousands of cowboys come into town. The hotels are packed. The restaurants are packed. There's people with the nicest blue jeans you've ever seen, the nicest pickup trucks, the nicest cowboy hats. SQL Pilot says it's not CES. It is not CES. It is the rodeo. And everybody who works in hospitality and tourism and restaurants here knows it. Like, you do not go to the Strip when the rodeo is in town. Jim Van Allen says NFR, National Finals Rodeo. I didn't even know what NFR stood for, but I know NFR is the rodeo around Christmas. It's absolutely crazy. It's huge. So that was really big. So Vegas doesn't change much there. It did change during F1 because the traffic was really bad, and also because the people who flew in were extremely wealthy. You know, you think that Super Bowl's like, Rihanna's here. Oh, no, we're talking about people who are billionaires, multi-billionaires flew in for Vegas. And they go and buy all kinds of crazy stuff, like the jewelry stores, and I have friends who work in all kinds of high-end retail. And all kinds of expensive stuff got sold during those dates. It was even wild. The most expensive house in Vegas sold like a year to 2 years ago for $20 million. And during F1, somebody bought it for $35 million. They flipped that house, a $20 million house. They flipped it over for $35 million because somebody who was an F1 viewer came in on their private jet and was just like, I want a house here. What's a nice house? And bought the nicest one that there was. Absolutely crazy. Jessica says, hours after the F1, the airport was backed up for 3 hours due to the private jets trying to fly out. There's only space in the main Las Vegas airport. There's only space to park about 500 private jets. And so it's funny, the weird trivia things that you learn. And so what you do is, Solutions Group Unlimited caught it. What you do is you fly into Vegas with your private jet. Everybody gets off, the private jet immediately takes back off and goes to other airports, and you store your private jet at the other airport until the Super Bowl or F1 finishes. Your private jet comes back to the Vegas airport, touches down for 5 minutes in order to get everyone on, and then immediately takes back off again. Things you did not think you were going to be learning from a SQL Server podcast or webcast. Next up, Rojo says, you mentioned using real-world data to load test the database, especially for scale. I mentioned that people want it. No, I didn't tell you how to do it. He says, is there a mechanism to replay data into the database and throttle it up for load testing? If you Google, you'll find a bunch of them. All of them suck. Next question. Smaragda says, what's your opinion of database sharding for relational databases? So database sharding, the idea behind it is that let's say you've got customers all over the world and you put customers in different databases. Like maybe you segment them geographically. You put the North American customers in one database, the European customers in another database, the Asian customers in another database. That's a bad idea. You don't usually want to do that. The segmenting by geo, you usually want to segment by something else. That's okay. I'm using it as shorthand here. The problem is that when people say a product to do it, they think that they're just going to connect to one database and this product is magically going to pull the data from wherever it lives. Like I just want to connect to the master database server, and then wherever my database data lives for this customer, it's going to fetch it from there. Well, guess where your bottleneck's going to be? If everything still connects into one database server. Hello, McFly. So it doesn't work very well in the SQL Server world. Now, in other database platforms, or I should say, the way that you really want to do it is you want to have your application or the developer's application know which database server to log into to get the appropriate data. Then it works beautifully, but you don't need a product for that. You can do that just by writing that code yourself. Mr. Consultant, man, just write the code yourself. Jessica S says along in the notes or in the Twitch chat there says every sharding strategy I've ever seen has a massive custom data access layer to go along with it, and that's true. I would add on with what Jessica says. Successful data sharding products or projects have all had that layer as well. Back to the previous question, SQL Dev DBA says SQL query stress sucks the least, but it's not necessarily a replay tool. Right, exactly. It's not real-world data. It's not a replay tool. You're just throwing random data across at the SQL server, and that's kind of the end of it. Oh, wow, my dad just texted me. He's in Florida. That's kind of cool. And then we'll do one more. Let's see here. Venkat says, what was your old saying about database performance? You can have 2 out of 3 of A, B, C, but not all. I don't think I've ever said that. There's a common saying, good, fast, and cheap. Pick any 2. Good, fast, and cheap. Pick any 2. You can have something good and fast, but it won't be cheap. You can have something fast and cheap, but it won't be good. I don't usually say that about database performance, though. Oh, it might be. Oh, well, SQL Pilot says I have one about 3 dials. Yeah, if you think of database performance, it's like a box with 3 dials on the front of it. There's a dial for table design, there's a dial for query design, and there's a dial for hardware. But you can turn all three of those up. I've got clients who spend tons of money turning all three of them all the way to the max. The part of that when I'm working with managers is I show them, okay, here are your three dials. Here's where they're set right now. For reference, here's what it would look like to turn it up all the way so that you can understand that you're turned down low. And just because it doesn't just crank the hardware and hide lots of sins, sometimes when clients come to me, they're running 80 core servers, 2 terabytes of RAM, and they're like, okay, we've run out of hardware to go next. What are we going to do? And then we talk about how you turn the other dials. All right, so there we go. We went for quite a while on that one. That was quite a long office hours there. I will stop here. That's probably about enough procrastination for the day. I will stop and go do some real work, and I will see y'all at the next office hours. Thanks for hanging out. See you next time. Adios.